Shalom, and welcome to What the Watchman Sees, a ministry that will sift through all of the social media noise to show you news of importance from the Most High's perspective. As watchmen, we are here both to warn of dangers and give biblical answers for dwelling in the secret place of the Most High during these times of confusion. Tell your family and friends to like, share, and subscribe as we delve into what Yahweh has for us, the apple of His eye. Let's get to work. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're going to do a meditation that is covering the idea of connecting the dots between the church that Stephen talked about and was killed for as he preached the gospel, and the church in the wilderness that he was speaking about as he relayed the history of his people from their very beginning up to that present time. And we're doing this because of the times that we are living in. The times that we are living in are very stressful, and people have a tendency to want to go back to something that is more stable and more predictable. Those aren't the days that we're living in. So we can either see that as completely negative, or we can also see the potential, and that what is happening is a manifestation of that which is going to replace all of the things that have happened in the past and up to now. But you can't have two if you will, systems operating at the same time. One of them has to pass away so that the other one can thrive. But in that interim period, there's a lot of chaos. So that being understood, the Most High has told his people, these are the days that you are to shine forth as the sun. So the Most High's people should not be discouraged. We should be encouraged that all of the things that he's been teaching us as his people are now needing to be taught to everyone else. So we've got to be stable in order to do that. So that's what this lesson is about, so that we can, as the Most High's people, connect the dots, if you will, between what Stephen was saying and the origin of his comments. So we're going to go ahead and bring up the presentation. Okay. So we're talking, there are a couple of words that you're going to hear and do need some explanation. We're talking about the church in the wilderness. So we're talking about the church. We're also talking about feast days or worship, and how both of those directly relate to the assignment that the Most High has for his people in this day. And as we go through this meditation, what we want to be able to get out of it is that the Most High wants much, much more out of us than just being a religious and a ritual oriented group of people. Okay, so we're going to be looking at several key scriptures, one of them in Acts chapter 7, which is the account of Stephen. And actually there is a typo on the screen here, because the first one, Acts 7:38, it actually should say Acts 2:38. So we'll talk about that. And then also we're going to be looking at the book of Exodus and how that relationship that Moses had with Pharaoh and his people is the beginnings of where we are right now. Okay, so let's go ahead. So that first word, the church, does need to be given a definition. The common teaching is that the church began on the day of Pentecost in Acts 2 chapter 38, verse 41. It says, and the Most High added to the church daily such as should be saved. So the scriptures actually do say the Most High added to the church. Okay. So the question that we will start this meditation on is, was that actually the beginning of the church? And so, or did it begin earlier? So that's what we're looking at. Okay. And the way that we find the answer to that question is by using the law of first mention. You've heard me talking about that before. When it comes to studying the Bible, this is a good way to get information that allows us to see what the Most High is telling us and teaching us from the perspective of the people that first received the messages or first received the instructions. So that's what the law of first mention is. Now, the reason that's important is because, for instance, we might have a word that we use with a specific definition, actually, church, how we use it today, but that wasn't necessarily how that same word was used, understood, and related to when that concept was there. So it's more than just words. It has to do with phrases. It has to do with content. Okay, so the Bible study method is to find the first use, because that'll give us the meaning in its original context, and it helps us to be able to understand, or to allow the Bible to interpret itself. I'll say it that way. So the church in Acts chapter 2, that word is a Greek word, and it means the called out assembly. Okay. But that concept can be found all the way back in Moses' day when Israel was called out of Egypt. The church is being called out of the world system into its purpose. Israel was called out of the oppressive Egyptian system to fulfill their purpose. So, but it means more than just being called out. Actually, when you look at the word, it also has to do with an assembly of a group of people that have been assembled to to at a certain place at a certain time, so that they can do business on behalf of the community. That's the concept of the called out. That's the concept of, oh, I didn't use the word ecclesia or ecclesia in Greek. Okay. But that's what the scriptures are talking about. So when the people in this first century heard that word church, that's what they heard. They heard that it's a assembly of people coming together for a common purpose to do the business that will enhance the community. And that business could be a variety of things. It could have to do with a tribunal, for instance, settling disputes. And so when all of those things take place, they had to have an established group of understandings, what we call rules, okay, in order to do that work of the assembly. That's a fuller understanding of what church is. Now, certainly the spiritual foundation is all related to the Most High, so that we are gathered together in the name of the Most High for a specific purpose. And that's the same way it was with Israel. They were called out of Egypt and called into a relationship with the Most High on that. Oh, I haven't talked about the feast yet, so I might be getting ahead of myself. But they were called out into the desert to meet with the Most High. Okay. So that's what this slide is talking about. So in Exodus chapter 5:1, when Moses confronts Pharaoh. And let me just say, have you ever wondered how in the world did Moses get up in Pharaoh's court in the first place? That's where understanding the context is so important. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's court. He was well known, even though the Pharaoh that was trying to kill him had died. There were lots of other people who knew who he was, including the current Pharaoh, because when we say the word Pharaoh, all we're talking about is the ruler of that nation. That's where Moses lived. He was among the powerful before he got exiled into the desert. So that's how he got up there to talk to Pharaoh. Pharaoh knew him already. Okay. So when he came to Pharaoh, he didn't come as a peasant. He came as a royal person speaking to another royal person. In other words, he came as that man's equal at the very least. Now, what the Most High said to Moses is, "I'm going to make you a god to this dude." But at the very least, he was his equal. So he goes up to the Pharaoh, and that's when he says, "Let my people go, so that we can meet with the Most High and hold a feast in the wilderness." And that word feast is the same word as when the King James Version reads it. It says, so that we can go worship in the wilderness. So when we talk about worship in 2025, that's a different understanding than when he said it in Exodus chapter 5. Because what he was really saying is we're going to go and meet with our creator. And that's a part of the not only the history but the culture of the children of Yasharel. They had a number of feast days or days when they were to set apart and meet with the Most High. They're called Moedim in Hebrew. Okay, so that's what these feast days were. It wasn't just to eat food, although they did that too, but the main purpose was for them to be assembled as a people group and listen to the instructions of the Most High as to how they were to be as a people. Before, they were just a big family. They were going into the wilderness to become a nation. And that nation was to be a nation of priests unto the Most High and unto the people around them. Okay, so that's what Stephen was telling the people in Acts chapter 7. So when he talked about the assembly, because, or actually the more importantly, Stephen used the word church, and he used the word church in relationship to the children of Israel in the wilderness. That's when the church was first established. It was established as the nation of Yasharel, of Israel. And they were to be a separated people. They had a divine purpose, and they were being given a foundation as a called out community to do the work of the Most High. The work of the Most High is not religious work. It's nation work, but it's to be a righteous nation. And so that's what Stephen was telling his people that they hadn't been doing. And just like the thing that got him killed, he said, which of the prophets have y'all not killed? because every time the Most High sends somebody to you to tell you you're not living right, you've got a wrong focus, then you kill that messenger, and they killed him too. But the reason why we're looking at it is because that's the first mention of church, of the church of the Most High. It's the church in the wilderness. It's the assembly. It's the bringing together of people of the Most High in the wilderness. Okay, so that's what he talked about. And all of that happened under Moses. So this is just kind of a repeat of that. So then what is the purpose? Well, I said it already, but this is what the children of Yasharel then and now are supposed to be doing: to represent the Most High and to act as priest. And one of the major jobs of the priest is the job of reconciliation. See, that's why the Father said, I'm only going to give a certain tribe the responsibility of making these sacrifices, which is actually the order of service that the scriptures talk about. So when we hear worship service, we think about how things happen when we go to church. However, originally it was an order of how to serve the Most High. It was a sacrificial way of serving, which made them holy enough to be able to serve a holy God. And that holiness was given by Him. So the priests were to serve as the mediators between the Most High and His people, just as His people were to serve as the mediators between the Most High and the rest of the world. So that was always the design for Yasharel. A nation of priests are those who represent the Most High, reconciling the world back to Him, and demonstrating how that looks. What does that look like? Well, how would Israel know? That's what happened on Mount Sinai, because Israel didn't know. Moses went up on that mountain to get from the Most High the tenets of civilization that the Most High expected His people to live under and to live by, because those tenets presented them as a holy nation, a nation set apart to represent the Most High on the earth. So when they went into the wilderness, that's why Moses called it a feast, or as I had said earlier, a moedim or a moed. So it was an appointed time. Now, let me just mention, I answered a question that may have been in the hearts of people wanting the answer, wanting or trying to understand, why would Moses have said to Pharaoh, let my people go so that we can go into the wilderness and have a feast or have a time with the Most High? Because wasn't that a lie? In most of our understandings, what Moses told Pharaoh was, we're going to go 3 days into the wilderness and worship the Most High, with the implication that, and then we'll come back. But that wasn't what he said. He said, we're going to go on a 3-day trek to have a meeting with the Most High. Moses never gave Pharaoh the impression that they were going to return. Pharaoh already knew this. That's why he didn't want to let them go. Okay, so, but when they met with the Most High, that was their time of instruction. That was their time to receive the covenant that was based on that instruction. And that was the time to prepare themselves to be this nation that would then carry these things out in a land that had been established for them. That's what was supposed to happen in the wilderness. Now, don't take these numbers for anything other than just an idea. But when it comes to the timeline, in other words, rather than saying, okay, we'll be there 3 days and then we'll be right back, it took between the time that Yasharel left Egypt to when they got to the mountain of Sinai, that was 90 days. We already know Moses was 40 days on that mountain. And actually, it was 80 days because he was there for 40 days to get the commandments that the Most High had written. And then as soon as he went down the mountain and saw the people acting a stone fool, then he had to go right back up on the mountain so that the Father, for another 40 days, so that the Father could give it to him all over again. And then once that happened, they began to travel through the desert. But the point is, that should have only taken about 150 days at the maximum. Well, we know how long that took. It took 40 years. Okay. And there was a reason why it took 40 years. It had to do with the people's unbelief. It had to do with the people's disobeying from the very beginning. Don't forget, the first commandment was, you shall have no other gods before me, and you shall not make unto yourselves any graven images and bow down and worship them. What were they doing when Moses came down the mountain? They had taken one of the gods of Egypt in the representation of a calf, a golden calf. They were worshiping that calf. They were actually in licentious behavior as a part of that worship. So that's why Moses had to break the stones and go back up and get it all over again. Because had he not done that, all those people would have been wiped out. But they spent that 40 years in the wilderness because of things like that. But the main reason that they had to spend 40 years in the wilderness is because when the Father wanted them at the end of that 150 days to go into the promised land, they wouldn't go because they were scared of the giants that were over there. And I just said something in passing, but literal giants. That's what they were scared of. Okay. They weren't scared of people just because they seemed to be more organized or there were more of them. No, they were scared because those were giants. And it was giants in that land. And so that's, if you remember, one of the things as those spies went to spy the land, when they came back, they came back with these grapes that were so big that they had to be carried on a pole. Okay, that the grapes were big, and so were the people. That's the point. Okay, so they said, no, we ain't going up in there, and then that's when the Father said, okay, well, you're going to stay in this desert till all of y'all that don't want to do what I just gave you to do die out. Maybe your children will obey me, because I understand y'all won't do that. Does this sound familiar to you? Does this sound like any people that you know? And don't look anywhere but in the mirror. So, but because of that, their destiny was delayed. And now I want to relate that to where we are today. This is why it's so important for us to do what the Most High wants us to do, because he's already given us a destiny. But the thing that's delaying our destiny is us, because we're doing all of these other foolish things, meaningless things, and not being this holy nation of people that he wants us to be. So again, our purpose from the very beginning was to be a nation of priests, not a religious system, not a ritual based system. That was not the purpose, but that's what they ended up doing then. That's what got Stephen killed, because they didn't want to stop doing it in Acts chapter 7. And that's what we're doing now. The Most High wants us as his people leading in righteousness right now, not when we go to heaven. And that's a whole nother lesson. He wants us leading right now. But we can't do that because we're too busy doing church. I'm not speaking against the assembly because, see, that's the other thing, that there is a Bible verse that says, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves. That is absolutely the case. And that's part of the definition of the church. We are supposed to come together. So not only is there nothing wrong with it, that's what's supposed to happen. But when we come together, it's to exalt ourselves. It's to do things that are unimportant for the purpose that we're supposed to be coming together. So we have relegated worship to a ritual rather than understanding that worship has to do with setting our hearts and minds to obey the Most High. And when we obey the Most High, part of what's going to happen is we're going to praise Him, because as we do what He's given us to do, there's going to be all kinds of opposition, just like it was with Stephen. But yet the Most High will be seen as faithful to us and to His word. And that is what causes praise to go up. The blessings are icing on the cake. It's what causes us to praise in the first place. So we thank the Most High for the purpose that He's given to us. And we do that on a regular basis, but that's not all we do. We got to know what He says, not taking a text. We have to know the word. And that's where we get the understanding that you can't do that in a 20-minute sermon. That's too much responsibility that's placed on one human being. The church is a assembly. Now, there are leaders in the assembly, but the leaders are there to empower everybody in the assembly with the same amount of knowledge and understanding that they have, so that when the people leave there, they don't leave unequipped, because they're going to be tested. So this gets us to where we are now. When the Father looked at what the people who were called by His name were doing and are doing, He said, the time for that foolishness is over. I'm shutting it down. And that's what He did. He shut it down. He closed the churches temporarily. It gave us an opportunity to reset. But what are we supposed to reset to? The old landmarks, the foundation. And that takes us back to Yasharel. We have to understand that if anything righteous is going to happen, it's going to happen by us and through us, because that's why we're here. So that's what we need to return to. We need to hear from the Most High, which is the Shema. Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah, your ruler, is one, and you shall love your Creator with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. We say it every Sunday. Well, most of us do. But then we live like that's only a ritual, okay? Because when we love Him with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our might, we're going to obey His word, which means that we believe it. And that's what gives us the status of holiness. We didn't make ourselves holy. He made us holy. And that's our calling, to be holy because He's holy. That's the purpose that we must return to. Holiness is everything, because we cannot be reconcilers. Let me just say this. Where is Jesus right now? If people don't see Jesus in you, Jesus doesn't exist, because they can't see heaven. That's why he came in the first place, so that all humans could understand this is what God looks like. This, not in the physical form, in what he said and what he did. And he said, unless a corn of wheat is planted in the ground and dies, it cannot grow up and produce fruit. Who's the fruit? That's us. Well, what has he produced? He's produced himself. These are the kinds of things that we should be meditating on, because that would make our behavior different. He came to serve. We come to be served. So when we do it his way, the same thing that happened with Yasharel coming out of Egypt as a ragtag group of people and moving into the promised land as a nation. That's the same thing that the Most High wants for those who are called by his name now. So we need to stop doing things our way. We need to put, if we want to have a religious routine, cool. Okay. But trust and believe that is not the purpose that the Most High has given us this life for. It'll help us with our traditions, but it doesn't help us to do what we're destined to do. Yah wants us doing things his way, not our way. He wants a holy nation rather than a religious routine. He wants a nation functioning in its kingdom purpose rather than a group of people going by what Big Mama and them did. Before Big Mama was, I am. So the call is to return to the wilderness pattern. In other words, return to our original calling and purpose. Well, what is that? To be a nation of priests and reconcilers underneath the king, who is Yeshua, and he is coming back. But he's coming back for an assembly that's not spotted. See, that's the difference between us and our ancestors in the wilderness. They never removed the spots. They never let him take the spots away. He has given us that blessing, and it's not something that we did. It's something that he did. That's why it's so important to understand who Yeshua is and what he actually did. So there is Yah's will and there's our will. When we were young people in college, some of us wanted to be revolutionaries. Some of us were saying then the same things that are being said now. We don't need this place. We can do stuff on our own. We can build our own society. So we used to say, what time is it? It's nation time. That's where that came from. And so that's the same thing that the Most High is telling us as his people, those called by his name. What time is it? It's nation time. It's not religion time. It's nation time. Nations include the entire spectrum of life and godliness. And certainly included in that is the time that we spend in praising him and worshiping. But the other part of worship is to take care of the widows, take care of the orphans, make sure that people have food that's not killing them, make sure that those who have the ability to be healed are healed, make sure that those who are blind can be given their sight. We got work to do as Yah's people. Father, bless you and keep you. Father, make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Father, lift up his countenance upon you and give you his